you're just like the landed gentry of the 19th century. You are landowners. And the only reason you have that land is because one of your ancestors was evil and stole the land off someone else. Ukrainian people were turned to cannibalism. This is all documented. Families in Ukraine were selling their babies.
So Starma's got a new nickname. So I don't know if you, in previous episodes, we've talked about his various nicknames. So it's 2-tier, free gear, no beer. I think there's another one as well, but I couldn't remember it. No beer Kia. But there's a new one now, Nick, which you may or may not be aware of, which is Farmer Harmer Starma.
I like that one, I saw it a few days ago.
Farmer Harmer Starma. So what's that all about, Nick? Why are they calling him a Farmer Harmer Starma?
That's all about this inheritance tax on farmlands, which, well, the march is today in London. Correct. So even though this won't go out till Friday.
It's the 19th today,
so this is the Tuesday. This won't go out for 3 days, this episode. I was worried this morning when I saw the snow, thinking, are people going to turn up? Because if people don't turn up, the government's going to claim victory. Go, look, no one really cares. But it seems to have gone well. Their idea is they're looking at farmers and saying to themselves, look at these landowners, and we allow them to pass the farm on to their son or daughter free of charge, where when you die and your children inherit your house, they're going to have to pay some like 40% inheritance tax on it, whatever the figure is. But farms are exempt from this because it's food production. So they think that's unfair. And then now, I think it's 20%, they're going to introduce a special tax, inheritance tax for farmers at 20%, if the land's over $1 million or something, which would be the vast majority of farms, because land's so expensive in this country. And the farmers have said, no, it means the family farm dies, because I'll give it my son. He'll have to go to the bank and get a loan out for 20% to pay off the tax.
And these farms, a lot of these farms are just by virtue of the fact that land has gone up in value. So I have a neighbour in Wales who owns 500 acres. And in the time that I've known him, which now must be getting on for 20 years, that's gone up from like £500 an acre to probably like £5,000 to £10,000 an acre. So by virtue of just him sitting on that and farming, and he's a proper farmer, this guy. He works like an absolute Trojan. He does
7 days a week job. He's 12-hour days.
I used to have a chat with him in the evening in the summer, and he'd drive over in his little, they drive these four-wheel scooter things or whatever they're called. And it'd be about 7 or 8 o'clock, and he'd be falling asleep on his. He was so shattered. He'd been up since 5, working all day, and he was literally falling asleep. And that wasn't just my conversation either, Nick. You know what I mean? He was shattered. These guys work hard, but his farm will have gone up. His farm's probably worth 5-10 million quid now. So 20% on that. Forget the £1 million. But the reality is that it's 2 million quid.
So someone's got to go out and get a loan for that. If they get a loan, but let's say they get the loan and start paying that back. Lots of farms aren't making a good living as it is, without putting in extra debt of £2 million on the farm they've got to pay back. So, and then let's say they get a loan for 30-40 years, and then the farmer dies after 10 and passes it on to his son. He's now got an extra 20% on top of that. So all this will kill small family farms. And people might be thinking, well, who cares? The mines did have jobs, and then we closed the mines down, and just because a business isn't productive, it closes down. This is the market. And there's an argument to be made for that. But another argument is, we're in Ireland, we need food. Hitler tried to starve us into surrender in the 40s. And that can happen again, because a war is coming. There's always a war coming. We need to be able to feed ourselves as a nation. Farms are really important for that.
And we only at the moment provide 55% of our own food. So we rely on imports. I
think it's less than that now.
Is it?
I've read or wrote something about it the other day. But anyway, it's in the maybe the early 50s or 50% of our food, which means we import Yeah.
50% of our food
Yeah.
from countries. And the Ukraine causes a problem because they produce so much wheat.
Yeah.
So, that's why part of the reason bread went up, wasn't it?
Exactly. We import a lot of fruit and veg from Spain, meat from all over the world, like New Zealand. And we say to ourselves, well, British farmers are expensive. Well, they are expensive because of all the bureaucracy we put on them,
Correct.
all the legislation, all the things we make them do that won't happen in Spain, won't happen in New Zealand. And then we buy their stuff because it's cheaper. We need to take away the red tape, the bureaucracy. We still need some standards, of course we do. But we keep hampering our farmers and then buying stuff abroad. And then we have to give them subsidies to keep going. Well, no, let's take away the subsidies, but let's take away the red tape as well.
We hardly give them any subsidies anyway. What would you... I think they're given $1.5 billion a year,
Yeah.
which is the same as the winter
Winter
fuel
fuel
allowance, and is a tenth of what we're sending to Africa for climate change assistance. What would you say to the farmers if you were going to come into power next year, Nick? What would you say? What would you do for them?
Well, I would stop that inheritance tax, only because farmers are important.
Yeah.
But I don't, even if Tories get in next time, I don't think the Tories will change it. Because Tories changed nothing last time they came in power. Didn't change any of Blair's things. So they'll just go, we can't afford it. Someone's done the heavy lifting now. We'll stick with that because we're going to win a fortune every year. The farmers just need to fight.
Yeah.
The farmers can be powerful when they come together. Look what happened in Holland.
Yeah.
The French farmers
very militant.
The French change laws all the time.
Yeah.
Do you remember what happened in Sri Lanka 18 months ago?
I think so, yes.
So the Sri Lankan government signed up to net zero and all that rubbish, which meant they couldn't import fertilisers for their farms. So the farms struggled to produce the crops they needed to feed the people. There was food shortages. The people revolted and pulled down the government. Government fell.
No, that's right, yeah.
So that's how important farmers are.
Yeah.
So the farmers won't change the government's mind today going on the streets of London. But this is a campaign they need to carry on. And they need to get more militant. And I think the British public will be behind them. We're not behind some of the activities like Just Stop Oil and stuff like that, but I think we're behind the farmers.
I think we are behind them. And just to give a flavour of that, let's look at who the actors are in this on both sides. So Kevin, you know who Kevin Maguire is? He's a journalist.
Yes,
in the Mirror.
He's a left-wing journalist.
He's a left-wing. He's a, as I wrote in a WhatsApp group, he's an odious little shit.
Yeah.
So he wrote on Twitter, Keir Starmer must win the fight with the tax-dodging landowners. And that gives some insight into the way these idiots think. They just see the farmers as wealthy landowners who are trying to dodge taxes.
Well, that's one of the faux pas from Jeremy Clarkson. So Jeremy Clarkson said he bought his farm because he wants to do shooting on it, and when he dies, his children won't pay any taxes on it. And that happened to be correct. Now, if we've got people, and I'm sure this is happening, if we've got millionaires buying land because they know it's a tax-free inheritance for their children, that's not what this...
No, but how many will be doing that? It'll be a tiny amount.
Of course it's a tiny amount, but if that's a loophole in our tax system, then that's a nut. You crack a nut with a nut cracker. You don't use a sledgehammer on it. So let's close the loophole on that. And that can be, well, when we say farm, we don't mean land. We mean people who are producing food for the nation.
Correct.
That's what we mean by farm.
Yeah.
And we'll close that loophole. So these are just excuses now that people who are in favour of this are saying to try to win some public support, that this is all about tax avoidance and stuff like that. But what it really is about are far left people look at farmers and say to themselves, you're just like the landed gentry of the 19th century. You are landowners. And the only reason you have that land is because one of your ancestors was evil and stole the land off someone else. That's the only reason you have this.
Probably a black person.
Yeah, probably a black person, yeah. Because, countryside was full of black Africans those days. And we deported them all to Africa. Africa used to be white, full of Eskimos. You know that, don't you? And this is vindictive. This is them looking at farmers going, you're landed gentry, you're the bourgeoisie, we're the proletariat, and we're trying to right a wrong that happened in history when your ancestors stole all this land.
And here's a quote which seems very appropriate at this point. We are able to carry on a determined offensive against the kulaks, to break their resistance, to eliminate them as a class, and substitute for their output the output of the collective farms and the state farms. Who said that?
Stalin.
Stalin.
Yeah.
And that's really what this is, isn't it?
Do you remember what happened in what Stalin did to the Ukraine? So
remind us.
So that's what he's referencing there. So what happened was Stalin looked at Ukraine, all these farmers, and went, no, not we need to privatize. We need to not privatize. We need to take them all into privatization. Yeah, privatization.
Yeah.
So they took over all these farms. Just like now, Ukraine was the wheat basket of Europe, and it was then. Stalin took over, and the farmers produced nothing, and 6 million Ukrainians starved to death because Stalin interfered with the food supply. Ukrainian people were turned to cannibalism. This is all documented. Families in Ukraine were selling their babies for money. That's how bad the starvation was. It was like biblical proportions. And a few years before, they were the breadbasket of Europe. Same thing happened in Zimbabwe. When the whites pulled out, who run all the farms, Zimbabwe was the breadbasket of Africa. So many years later, 20, 30, 40 years later now, they rely on imports of food from the World Food Programme. Same with South Africa, producing loads of foods, and suddenly this Marxist government interferes with it, killing farmers. They don't produce enough food now. That's what happens when you mess things up.
But it's almost like this government are following the Russian communist playbook. You know what I mean? Political prisoners, destroying the farms, taking the farms off the landowners. All these activities there,
it's because they have the same aim.
Putting more people on the public sector, borrowing money, driving down entrepreneurship. It's unbelievable.
This is how you get to the socialist utopia.
Yeah,
they're following the Marxist playbook.
It is, but it's so transparent. I think that's what really, really shocks me. I mean, just talking about the actors in this. The actor on the other side, which gives you a sense, is Jeremy Clarkson.
Yeah.
So Jeremy Clarkson went today with the farmers to London. Yeah,
he's the PRQ on this, because I'm not a big fan of. I mean, I have no opinion on Jeremy Clarkson.
Really?
I don't watch any of his shows.
Don't you?
Never have done.
Do you not watch Clarkson's Farm?
No. So I don't watch any of his shows or anything like that. So I'm not a fan of Clarkson. But on the flip side, I don't dislike him either. Right. But I know he's got a big following.
He'll be pleased to know. I'll email him following this.
He's got a big following, so he's a great PR win for the farmers. So I just hope they're successful.